Hello, and welcome to the Book and Rails special summer series, curated by the Rails editors. During the weeks of July 19th and July 26th, we're celebrating the sections that make up the Brooklyn Rail, which you can find in print and on our website, free and accessible to all. Our conversations this week will celebrate the editorial diversity covered in the Rail and here in our virtual events. I'm Megan N. Liberty, and I'm the art book section editor at The Rail. I've been writing for this section since 2015, and I became an editor in 2018. One of my favorite aspects of editing the art book section is I get to teach so many readers, writers, and other critics that the book is art. One of the people I love talking to about this is who's joining me today, Corina Reynolds, the director of Center for Book Arts, a nonprofit devoted to the book as art here in New York City. I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you all for tuning in today. As Megan mentioned, my name is Corina. I'm the executive director of Center for Book Arts. Today we are actually not at Center for Book Arts. We are zooming in from the Grolier Club, which is another book-related organization in the city. But we thought it would be fun to have these
a nice book background
going on. But let me tell you a little bit about Center for Book Arts. So I've been at CBA for almost 3 years now, but the organization is a lot older than that. We were founded in 1974, and for nearly 5 decades, CBA has been, presenting a rich array of exhibitions, classes, public programs, and all kinds of opportunities for artists, writers, publishers, and collectors. In 1974, Center for Book Arts was founded by the artist and bookbinder Richard Minsky. Richard's vision was to make a space where anyone could learn bookbinding and printing, and basically to have the power of the press in their hands. And we still do that today through our many programs, and those include things like ways that you could get involved are through our year-long artist residencies, which are paid opportunities. You receive a stipend, material support, and there's an exhibition at the end of the residency.
You've also recently started research residencies, which are really important to the kind of work we're doing at the Rail, encouraging research on book arts.
Absolutely. We have poetry readings as well, and we publish actually 14 poetry broadsides per year and 2 chapbooks. We have readings, so that's a great way to get involved. And then we also have exhibitions, and so we solicit artists and curators to propose exhibitions for our beautiful galleries in Manhattan.
Yeah.
So you can find out more about these opportunities in that section of our website. And the one thing that we're going to talk a little bit more about today is CBA's collection.
Yeah.
So over the last almost 50 years, we have amassed an incredibly diverse collection of book art. And so Megan's picked out a couple books that she likes. I've picked out a couple books that I like. And we're going to talk about books as art.
Yeah, and we're going to focus on kind of the intersection of criticism of the book as art and CBA's collection. So I'll be highlighting some of the reviews I've written for the Rail in addition to books in CBA's collection.
Yeah, absolutely. And along the way, we're going to show you a little bit about how you can browse our collection. What we're looking at right now is our online catalog, which Megan, as a writer and researcher, uses all the time. You can filter and search specifically for certain objects, and we'll show you those objects that we are looking at today in the catalog.
If you're interested in writing about art books, this is a great place to start, just to learn about what kinds of books are out there, all the different forms that artist books and art books take, besides just codex books. I think we're going to look at some cool shapes later in this talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also these collections are open to the public. So if you see something on the website that you're really interested in, you can just drop us an email or even pop in and take a look, and you can handle these books directly. You get to turn the pages, or for some of them that don't have traditional pages, you can really,
play with them.
Yeah, exactly. So should we get started?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Show me some books from your collection.
Okay, so the first book that we are going to be looking at today is The Speechwriter by Bani Abedi. This book was published in 2011 by the publisher called Raking Leaves. Let's see here. Let's get that video started for you. All right. So as I mentioned, this book, well, actually, so it is a codex, but it's actually a collection of codexes.
Yeah, wait for it, guys.
Yeah, it's really cool. So you open the book, it has this really amazing presentation here, but each of these rectangles is its own individual. Oh my gosh, I'm so slow. The anticipation is killing me.
It's cool though. Making these videos is actually very challenging. I had to make some for this talk too. And the reason we do these videos is because the intersection of book and art requires you to be able to see the sculptural qualities of these works. So just still images alone don't do them justice, as we're seeing right here as Corina flips through these little flip books.
Yes, so this book is actually made up of 10 flip books, and it's in a modified clamshell case. And the contents of these flip books follow the day in life of a retired political speechwriter. So the way that the publisher describes this is that the speechwriter is in his home. It's actually a fictional speechwriter, which I didn't realize the first time that I took a look at this book.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So he's surrounded by the memories of his family and his huge collection of speeches and everything that he has used over the previous years to build his career. And at the same time, you're seeing these little snippets. They're almost very cinematic. So I think this book is really cool because it, really makes a connection between cinematography, film, television, video, and the book, because they're both really sequential.
Time-based media.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is going to come up with one of the books that I've selected as well. But yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. As soon as I saw you flip through the books, I was thinking about how the flip book really emphasizes these existing qualities in artist books, which are their time-based media that you have to watch and sit through, and then they also require participation because you have to basically press play by turning the pages.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things about this book in particular, and why I think it's such a successful flip book, is that as you're flipping through the pages, you're getting this almost like silent breath. So when we talk about the book as object, a lot of times we're thinking about how it's sculptural or, what it looks like or the kind of like paper that it uses. But here it's telling a story about a retired speechwriter, so someone who's lost their public voice. And here you're flipping through and you're getting this almost like, just a quiet whisper of something that did exist at one point.
Yeah, and also thinking about how much speech is connected to breath and that kind of like audible sound that flip books make when you're kind of
flipping through the pages.
Yeah,
exactly.
I was thinking about like that film, The King's Speech, where it's all about pacing, which again, books are so much about pacing, which is kind of an interesting connection. I don't know if the artist who made this book has any background in film as well, or?
I think that they do actually have some background in film, but their primary medium is not books. So this is one of the first books that this artist made.
Yeah.
So this artist actually is from Pakistan and makes a lot of work about the relationship between Pakistan and India. And so through these kind of like fictional stories, they're telling these amazing or kind of like giving life to an amazing political or side of politics that we don't see very often.
Yeah. I'm just really enthralled watching these videos.
Yeah.
And then you're left with this kind of empty container.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Something that I really love about this publisher in particular, Raking Leaves, is the incredibly diverse range of artists that they're working with. This publisher is based in Sri Lanka. So it's actually also a part of the world that you don't necessarily associate with art books. I mean, here we are in New York, which feels like
the place where all books come from.
It's true. But this particular organization commissions contemporary artists all the time to publish new bodies of work in book form. So they're thinking about the book itself as an artwork, which is what, Megan, you and I talk about all the time.
All the time, yeah.
All right. So shall we look at our next book?
Oh man, but there's so right now because they're both sides, so there's two images that you can see of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure I got to see the full
book.
It's kind of funny thinking about it as time-based media, watching these videos, it helps me realize how long it really takes to experience these works. One question I get when people are learning about writing art book reviews and artist book reviews in particular is, do you read the whole book before you decide you're going to review it? Do you have to read the whole book in order to write a review? And my question, especially when you look at a book like this, what does it mean to read this book? Like, did we read it right now?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. When you're reading a book, when you're reading a novel, right, often you'll read it for the first time and you'll have a certain understanding of it. And then the second time you read it, and then the third time you read it, it keeps evolving. And this is a book where it really does. I don't think the first time that I read this book or interacted with this book, I didn't think about the breadth so much. And I didn't think about the cinematography so much. But after looking at it, and I've really actually looked at this book, I've showed it to probably, I don't know, 40 or 50 people at this point.
It's a good example of the kind of intersection of film, but also sculpture, performance, all these things that we often talk about when we're trying to encourage people to write about books in a different way than just a book report where you tell me what the book's about. These books are works of art. So they're about something, but they also are something.
Right, absolutely.
What's next?
Okay, so the next book is really exciting. Also one of my favorites.
So this is the collection page.
Yep, this is the collection page. This book is called It Is Better to Leave Your Home by the artist Romano Hani. And one of the reasons why I really love this book, actually, I'm just gonna start that video again for you guys, because this one also has a long video.
Oh wait, I think it's not playing it.
Thanks. Let's see here. Yeah,
oh, there
great.
We go.
Okay, so one of the things that I really love about this book in particular is the fact that it has an incredibly unique form and experience. So it looks like a normal book, and really, I wish now that I could redo this video for you, because one of the most surprising things about this book in particular is its weight. Often when I hand this book to someone and they pick it up for the first time, they're expecting it to be the weight of a regular coffee table book, but it really weighs almost nothing.
Yeah. See, the secret is I already know about this book, so I know what the catch is, but you don't know yet because it hasn't opened.
So as I mentioned, this book was called It Is Better to Leave Your Home by Romano Hani.
Oh, that's beautiful that it's on the edge there. I didn't notice that.
Yeah. Yeah, the title, a little bit of text there.
In Japanese as well, right?
In Japanese, in Dutch and English.
Oh,
so wow. For us, it's really great teaching tool because we can, talk to people from all parts of the world.
Because CBA, especially during the pandemic, has got such a international audience, people tuning in from all over the world to your events.
Absolutely. Yeah, over 60 countries. It's kind of amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Same for the Broken Rails NSE, which you guys are all watching now. We have had people attending our events that would never be able to come to our industry study spaces, which are often standing room only for our events. So,
well, thanks, COVID.
One of the only positives.
So let's see. So this book, concerns a particular disaster, which many of us have known about, the Fukushima.
Wait, can you tell them what pages are being turned right now? They don't know yet.
Okay. So it is hard to see here, but you can kind of see the texture a little bit. This book is printed on paper towels. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why the book is so light, but it's also one of the reasons why it has such an incredible tactile experience. So you can see that texture. So it's about the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster, which happened in 2011 and the ongoing impact of that. But this particular book is so cool because it is letterpress printed, so it uses a historical process, and at the same time, it uses an incredibly surprising material of the paper towels.
Yeah. Also, if you want to see this book in person, it's actually on view at Miriam Gallery in Williamsburg. Is it still there?
It's still there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. because you're doing a kind of collection swap with them. And so you can go, this is where I saw the book. I was at an exhibition at Miriam in Williamsburg, and it's just sitting on a shelf there on display. And I also just started turning the pages and realized they were paper towels.
Yeah, it's a surprising object. And the way that it's printed or designed, really, it looks almost like it could have been designed on a computer. But something that's really phenomenal about this is that every single little element, every single letter, every single dot, every single line in this book is hand set. So they're all made out of teeny pieces of metal, and they're put together.
Do you want to describe kind of a little summary of Letterpress for our audiences who may not be as familiar with how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So Letterpress is actually a really cool medium to work in, especially as an artist, because it enables you to produce small run books, something under an edition of 500, but to be in full control of every aspect of the process. So you can print photographically on it, you can print, it works really well for graphics and text, but you have full control over the color, you have full control over the placement, you have full control over how hard the impression is or how deep that image, text, line, graphic is embedded into the surface of the paper.
Which will be especially important for this book because the pages are so fragile.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can see actually in some of these where the ink, like that yellow, design there is actually, you can see the ink has crushed the paper towel. And so you can almost see the impact of the press on these. You can see it really well in the blue here. On these pages.
Yeah.
So the letterpress allows for someone with relatively little experience in printing to set up and produce a book or a print in multiples, which is why artists have used it for a really long time for producing artist books. Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about, having not actually read this book other than flipping through it and being really amazed by the pages, is if the materials connect conceptually to work at all.
Yeah, well, in relation to the Fukushima disaster, there also was a huge flood. I don't know if you remember this. So I think part of this is, and you can see here on one of the last pages, there's this idea of tears and loss. And I think the idea is that this book is really absorbing and holding all of not only the kind of like poetry and power of this artist's expression and experience of that disaster, but also the kind of like lasting impact of that disaster on the community that it affected.
Yeah, something that you and I talk a lot about specifically related to book arts is kind of the relationship between craft and concept and craft and conceptual art. And so I feel like books are such a great opportunity to link those things. And this is a perfect example of something that's really conceptually driven, where the materials are very craft oriented, very materially specific, but require, there's another thing happening here, but require have this kind of connection to what the book is about, the concept, and we're going to talk about some other books, but this is something that the kinds of books that I like to review in the Rail often are driven by this idea of a relationship between the materials and the concept.
Yeah. And actually what you're looking at right now is a small booklet that documents the making of this book. So you can really see the material aspects
here we see the letterpress setting. Yeah.
Yep. And there's actually this really funny story. This page here shows all the pages laid out for collating, which is when you're putting the pages in order before binding. And there's this really funny story about the artist realizing, halfway through the project that not all paper towels are created equal. And we don't think about this because we think about sheets of paper as being, always identical, but really, actually, paper towels are made in a way that, not every paper towel is the same width. So he was like running around to all of the grocery stores, measuring around the rolls of paper towels to try and get the paper towels that would be the same size, so that the books
would be the same dimensions.
And they varied sometimes by up to an inch.
Oh my goodness, that's really interesting. I just restarted the video so you guys have something to look at while we're talking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, should we go on to our next book?
Yeah, I think it's my turn next to show some books.
Yeah.
So this book is in your collection, but it is also a book that I reviewed in the Rail this year. So this is Martine Sims' Shame Space. I don't think my videos are nearly as long as yours, so we're probably gonna have to loop it. But so this is me making a video of this book. So Martine Sims, for those of you who aren't as familiar with her work, works a lot with digital culture and video art. So I don't know if she would like those terms, but that's when you see her work, it's often installations with multiple screens in a gallery space. There's talking, there's images, there's text happening all at once, all around you, kind of reflecting the onslaught of digital culture. But as you can see, this book, it's designed to mimic the style of a Bible. So you saw earlier the gold leaf edges. It's pretty small, as you can see, compared to my hands. The cover is textured. It's published by Primary Information, which also is known for producing historical facsimiles of books. So this is a contemporary book they've made. And this book actually translates text from some of her existing video pieces. She's created an alter ego character called My Thick Being, which is spelled mythic being, which some of you may recall was the name of a performance that Adrian Piper also did in the 70s.
Oh, right, yeah.
Where she dressed in drag and walked down the street. And then her mythic being, which was said mythic being, was also used in advertisements in the Village Voice. And so this was a persona she took on for a long time. Martine Sims hasn't specifically said that that's a reference point, but the similarities in the titles and the history of public performance and performance of self is a lot of what the text in this book is about. So the text are lines. I've quoted some lines in my review that I can read to you. So some of the themes she deals with, and then these images you're seeing right now are still images from videos that she's created. So these texts from the beginning and the videos that you're seeing stills of for now would play all at once in most of her installations. But in the book, she's separated them, kind of using the form of the book's temporality and making it slow. So we consume the text first, then we consume the images at our own pace. And as you can see, I can flip back and forth between them, versus in the videos, it's all happening at her pace. She's decided what images and what text go together, which is an interesting difference between film and book form, which have this relationship, but also different this way. So in the book, for example, I'm going to quote some of my review. I'm going to cheat because I already wrote about this, so I can just read you what I wrote. Sims' work mines selfhood, particularly the parameters, assumptions, and expectations around it, such as Blackness. Quote, I hate pretty people like I hate white people. They just don't know what life is like for the rest of us. Queerness. Quote, can I be queer and never date a woman? And gender. Quote, he was pushing back on the idea that men request more emotional labor than they give. He not all men me. I'm really starting to hate men. Yes, all men. This is like their voice that I read the whole book in, which really does read like part diary, part iPhone notes. I don't know about you, but I'm always taking notes on my iPhone on the subway, and it reads like this kind of stream of consciousness, but yet it's published. So there's an aspect of performance to it, of making it public.
Absolutely.
And yet the title is Shame Space. So there's a lot of different conflicting things going on here that allow us to process some of the material she talks about and uses in her films in a different way in book form.
Yeah, and there is something really interesting about referencing, like, you know, your cell phone and the notes that you're keeping on your cell phone and the kind of like intimate personal experience that you have with a book.
Yeah, and specifically the book she's referencing here is like the form of the Bible, which for people who are religious in that way, it's a very, very close relationship they have with the Bible. You see people on public transit that have their personal Bibles with them, pocket Bibles, which this is the size of, that they've read over and over again, similar to this idea of internalizing a narrative, something that's both private but shared publicly. You go to church and you pray together. It's collective but private at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's also really interesting, you know, that
I love this spread because that's Megan the Stallion. Sorry, just had to give a little shout out on the left side there.
For another Megan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also really interesting too that, you know, for people who maybe feel like they're on the outside of those, you know, religious moments where like you're on the train and you're watching someone read their Bible, or you almost might sometimes feel a sense of shame. And so I wonder if there is a connection there with the language and the format and these experiences that are being, you know, recounted through still images in the book.
Yeah, and I think The difference also here I wanted to make a note of is this book is published by a publisher whose books you can find in regular bookstores. And so I think the difference between the books that Corina has shown and the books that I'm going to show you is price point and where you find them. So at the Rail, one thing I try to do is make sure that we're reviewing books that people can find more easily. So one thing that I hope that we can figure out how to solve is how to make the kinds of books that really are slightly more art objects like the ones you showed us, how to make it so that we can review those books in spaces like the Rail that have audiences that may not know how to access those books. How do we create a pathway for those books to get reviewed and for the Rail audience to know more about those kinds of materials and how to access them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I'm always thinking about at CBA is how do I expose more people to these books that are medium specific, something that is so, intimately related, material, form, content, everything together. And, it might take an artist an incredibly long time to produce that book, but the end result is so effective that it's like, how do we get that into your hands?
Yeah, and I think it's so important that we're showing the collection information at the end of this presentation, and maybe on the Eventbrite page, you'll be able to see the collection information for all these titles. And as Corina said, you can make an appointment and go see them. So that's really a great resource as well.
Absolutely. The next book is not in our collection, but it is actually something that was recently exhibited at Center for Book Arts.
Wait, it was?
Yeah, it was in the Makes Reads Morcos Key exhibition. This was one of the books they selected. And I think they were involved in designing this book.
Well, the designer is Jerome Harris.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, Jerome Harris designed it. So one thing we're going to come back to, let me give you an introduction to this book, but the fact that it has a different designer than an artist is something that we're going to talk about too. But this book is actually two books in one. So the title is Wild Wild West, Haunting of the Seahorse, and it's by Jonathan Lyndon Chase. And it's published by Capricious Press, which is a gallery press, but they did a wonderful job with using a lot of different materials. So if you could tell when I opened the book, there's a plastic cover around it that actually made it really hard to make this video because it reflects a lot off of the plastic. The pages I'm turning now are matte pages, but at some point you'll see there's also vellum pages, and then the other story in it, the back story. So one story starts from the front and then you get to the middle and then you have to flip it upside down, reorienting yourself and start from the back to read the other story, which is on glossy paper. So there's a lot of different materials being used here, which I know that we often talk about. Are artists using materials smartly? Or are they just kind of getting excited and trying a lot of different papers? Here, I think it works really well to convey that there's two different stories that are separate but related, because the vellum is kind of towards the center, where vellum paper is more transparent. I'm going to get to some of it soon. So this idea of transparency between the stories as well. These are some of the drawings are on these vellum pages. Maybe they're not vellum. What's the word for that?
No, I think, this is the type of
like
paper.
Tracing paper almost, but thicker.
Yeah, but that's what it is referred to now, vellum. Is vellum.
Okay.
Vellum originally was an animal product.
Ugh.
I know.
So this story, the two stories are related. They're very much about queer romance, love, intimacy, and grief and death. The first story, Wild Wild West, is about the artist's grandmother's passing, and they were very close to her. She was a really instrumental figure in their life, and so you'll see a lot of the notes about grief being a process and having multiple chapters and stages to move through, and we move through them in the book as we turn the pages. The handwriting throughout is in both stories, so a lot of the visual cues and motifs are shared in both. And then Haunting of the Seahorse is the one that I found much more engaging because it's a very narrative-driven story about a couple that travels. So now you see I'm flipping it. So this is where it switches upside down and you can see the call of fawn. And now we're back at the back or the front, depending on when you open it. So this, The Haunting of the Seahorse, is kind of a sci-fi story about this couple traveling to outer space to do a research project in outer space. And one member of the couple is non-binary, the other identifies as male, and the non-binary member really wants to have a baby, wants to be pregnant, but they were born a man, so they don't have female reproductive organs, wants to carry a baby, wants to give life. They're out in outer space where they're doing biologic research on plants in a terrarium, and all these weird, mysterious things start happening to them. All the chairs get stacked together and moved to a different side. And so there's this fear that something is out there trying to kill them. Meanwhile, one of them is harboring this desire to produce life. So it's a really intense love story and romance about a couple. And what really interested me about this book, you can see these glossy pages in this story, is I love books that are designed in a way that kind of reproduces materials in facsimile, but changes their texture. So you think the pages are going to actually have these note papers in them. It approximates collage, but it's all digitally reproduced. You can see the baby there, the fetus. And so, yeah, it's just, so I really liked the materiality of it, but also the shared narratives of, it's very sexually explicit at times. It is very erotic, but it's also very tender and romantic. And that kind of narrative that balances intimacy and tenderness with eroticism is often not afforded to queer couples, especially a lot of the literature that we, the messages we're getting in popular culture about queerness, especially male gayness, is often overly sexualized, eroticized, cruising culture, all that, which is certainly part of the narrative. But this is part of it too, the idea of wanting a family and feeling loss over people who have left your life and how other people can help you fill that space. So getting back, I'm showing you the plastic cover here, which is so wild. So the reason this is designed this way, I saw that I attended the book launch for this event. And so this book was actually Jonathan Linden Chase. They kept a binder of materials, which are the kinds of materials you're seeing reproduced here, in a big plastic binder, and started taking notes and drawings and collating these stories this way, writing this story with these materials in this big plastic binder. And Capricious brought them together with Jerome Harris, who they knew each other previously, and they suggested Jerome as a designer for the book. And basically, Jonathan Linden Chase handed over this binder saying, this is my book, but I don't know how to make it into a book. So then Jerome had all these materials that needed to be turned into something that could be a multiple. So it was going to be a trade edition that could be produced in over 100 at least. And so they worked together on making these things that at some point there was tape on some of the materials, there's loose leaf pages, there's notes. How do we approximate that in a book that's going to be mass produced and mass distributed? And when I was reading this book, I texted Corina, do we think a book can be an artist book if it has a different designer?
Oh yeah, I remember that question.
And I don't think there's an easy answer. So something that I think maybe keeps people away from writing about artist books is they don't know what an artist book is, because if there's another designer, if you can find it in a trade bookstore, is it still an artist book?
And also often, you might come across an artist book or an art book, and it might not even say if there is a separate designer. So that's also a thing. It's like, how do you give authorship for what part of the book? How do you talk about it? How much of an influence did the designer have in, the pagination or the order that the pages are in, or as you mentioned, the exterior, which I think actually the solution that the designer found for the exterior of this book, the cover, is really smart. When you're telling me, I didn't know that bit about the binder.
The binder, So I think that's really interesting. And I think one of the things I try to do in the art book section is encourage my writers to ask these questions of the publisher or the artist or whoever they have access to when reviewing a book. Oftentimes I'll get excited about a book, write to the publisher to ask these kinds of questions. Who designed it? How involved was the artist? And the answers they give will make me realize I don't want to review it, because it doesn't actually have as much engagement on the part of creatives as I originally thought. And that's because I'm I'm looking to review a certain kind of book that totes the line between artist book and art book. So one quick note, Corina at CBA does artist books, right? But in the Rails section, for my readers out there, you know that we also review a lot of other books that aren't artist books, which is why it is the art book section. So we do review monographs of artists sometimes. We review books of criticism, books of theory, art historical books. But today we're talking about books that are in this intersection between the space of the art book and then the artist book, which is more your realm.
Right, absolutely. And maybe this is a good moment for us to transition to the next book, which is more actually, or I think it's a one-of-a-kind book.
Yeah, I couldn't find the edition info on your site actually, which is another interesting point. Things like this, like what edition is the book produced in? How was it printed physically? Who printed it? You know, sometimes the artist prints it, sometimes an outside printer prints it. How does that change our understanding of authorship in the book? Do we need to know that information?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes a book isn't even printed, which I think is the case in this one here.
Book, yeah.
So this is Cosmos After Chaos by Gloria Helfgott. And this book I actually hadn't seen before just yesterday when you came to the collection and we were kind of like
picking out
around
the books we were going to talk about. Yeah,
exactly. And so Megan and I came across this. It was pulled out for one of our researchers to look at. And I just made a super short video because, you know, you'll see. So the structure of this book is absolutely fascinating. It's a plexiglass accordion. And so it's a book that unfolds kind of like a screen. When we opened it, we were both like, oh, what is this?
Yeah.
It shows these kind of like planetary or cosmic images. And then there's this writing, or what looks like writing across the book, or across the pages of the book. And that is often known as asemic writing, which is a form of, I guess, artwork that is language without language, or language as visual language.
Yeah, visual language. I like that. Yeah, I haven't written about this book before, but we have reviewed other books that use this kind of visual writing style. Renee Gladman, her books that are not novels, but her more art books, she uses this. And Martha Dermichet was really popular back in the day. She used to do this, and we've reviewed both those artists before.
Yeah, well, you know, there are actually a lot of artists internationally that are working in the asemic tradition, which started, believe it or not, only I think in the 50s or 60s.
I don't know. I'll take it right away.
Yeah, if anybody knows, please let us know. But we just thought that this was an incredible example of something that is a unique book that at the same time is sculptural and uses a strange or unique material format to communicate something.
It pushes the boundaries of what we think of as book.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what artist books do at their best. Even if they're taking a traditional form, a codex form or a bound form, this is bound, right?
Bound in a way.
Yeah. Even when they're in a form that you expect, what are they doing that's unexpected? How are they making us rethink bookness?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's maybe a good point for us to transition to maybe our final topic.
Yeah, so another way that Corina and I know each other is that you guys may have seen this in the pages of the Broken Rail. We've started another criticism initiative together. So as I mentioned, at the Broken Rail, the art book section has to cover a lot of different types of materials. And it's a great space for artist books to share the page with reviews of exhibitions, theater, poetry, all kinds of other arts. But at the same time, it can't be the only space that exists for writing on artist books, because it doesn't allow the medium of artist books or the materials of artist books to develop fully, you know? And so I'm having so many writers write to me wanting to write about artist books, and I can only publish 5 reviews in every issue.
Yeah.
So Corina came to me.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. So a friend of ours, or a collaborator of ours,
one of our co-founders of this book art review project that we're telling you about.
David Solo and I have been talking for a while about how we need to find, you know, more ways of giving airtime to artist books and book art and the full spectrum of what books as artwork can be.
Which now you see in this spectrum is wide.
But yeah, the spectrum is wide. It's even wider than what we've seen, believe it.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we had a conversation with Megan and we were like, hey, we really like what you're doing. Are you interested in being a part of this? And she came back and was like, I have so many ideas.
Yeah, so we're just book art review. We're calling it a criticism initiative. Part of it is going to be workshop series where we teach people about writing about artist books. Part of it's going to be a magazine, which you can feel free to pitch us your reviews and essays about artists publishing. And,
pitch us, we will pay you.
Yeah, yep. But it's also, what was the third part of it? There's a third part.
Let's see. Okay, so we've got the
programs. We're doing public programs. So there's a lot of talks. Some of you may have attended the Printed Matter Virtual Art Book Fair, which the Book and Rail had a table at. A virtual table. So but there was also a conference that you may have tuned into some of my programs for. But Book Art Review led a series of programs there as well. So we're trying to encourage the kind of conversations that we're having right here for you in a space devoted specifically to just book art.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which allows a different type of writing than the kind of writing we're doing at the Rail. And there should be a lot of different types of writing about artist books. And that's the point we're trying to make.
Yep, absolutely. We're trying to make sure that it's as accessible as possible. So it'll be available in print and online. And we're also trying to make sure that we're touching on every aspect of the book arts. So it's not just photo books, and it's not just large edition books, but we're also looking at medium specific books and books that really challenge what we think of as a book.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to see any of the books or know more information about the books that we have showed you today, here are the full details of them. But I think that's pretty much the end of our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and joining the Rail audiences, teaching us about book arts and about CBA, which is a great resource here. If you're watching and you're in New York City, you should definitely check it out. I'm going to pass it off to our MC, who will introduce today's poet. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan. And see you guys soon.
Thank you, Megan and Corina. I want to thank you for that conversation and for your dedication to art books. I am going to read a poem for you today. I'm Nick Bennett, the Rail's Special Projects Editor. And some of the books that you showed today reminded me that how important playfulness is as an approach to creating things. So with that spirit of playfulness, I selected a poem by Fran Carlin titled Anal Nap. Anal nap. Am an ass. Max calls wants jam, fast. Can't. Sax is flat. Talks and rants. Max grabs dark Anna at bar. Last drank a malt. Max scrappa. Play blackjack. What a lark. Anna asks fat Sal, and Sal has smack. Anna bags a gram. Chance shall waltz. Falls alas staffed palace. Bad crash. Wan gal. Max brash. Wax Anna. What crap. Catch a tram. Pass Schraffs. Grab BLT and Franz Kafka at St. Mark's. Hank stands at bar and drags a fag. As a prank, Jack will smash Cal's watch. Cal slams Jack's glass at wall. Glass shards catch Nan. Nan balls. Brat. All damp and sad. Back at B's pad, B barfs all day. Shat. Saw B scratch wall and scrawl tract. Last law. What a mad bard. Shan't last. At park, box rap. Rap Bach. Car alarm. Van stalls and cabs and fast cars stand. Sat and had a nap. Want a warm black shawl. Cash. Mass. A dark psalm. Want calm. Thank you both.